To God be the glory.
Hello. Welcome as we look at another lesson from God's Word. Today, I have some bad news for some of you. According to the Scriptures, that dreaded disease called middle age begins at age 35. Psalms 90 verse 10 says, "The days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength they are 80 years." If our life lasts the average 70 years, we're middle-aged at 35. H. Norman Wright, in his book, Seasons of a Marriage, agrees, saying middle age ranges anywhere from age 35 to the mid-50s. He also gives these descriptions of middle age. Middle age is the time when a man who is always thinking that he, in a week or two, will start feeling as good as ever. Middle age is when you're too young to get on Social Security and too old to get another job. Middle age is when you're sitting at home on a Saturday night and the telephone rings and you hope it isn't for you. Middle age is when you stop criticizing the older generation and start criticizing the younger one. Middle age is when you want to see how long your car will last instead of how fast it will go. And middle age is when your old classmates are so gray and wrinkled and bald they don't recognize you. I also found these two sayings that are unfortunately too true. Middle age is when a broad mind and a narrow waist exchange places. And middle age is when you finally get your head together and your body starts falling apart. Middle age gets a bad reputation in our society that makes us all dread it. I have a cousin who was so upset when she turned 35 that she wouldn't even let anyone wish her happy birthday. Midlife, lived as it should be, can be a time of reminiscence and growth and challenge and delight, a time to welcome. Some versions say the worthy woman in Proverbs 31 smiles at the future or rejoices in the time to come. She doesn't age with a sense of foreboding. Each stage of our life has its own special pleasures and problems, and we can look forward to our journey into midlife as an adventure. Let's look at middle age today from two perspectives: evaluation and change. First, evaluation. Midlife is often a time of intense personal evaluation. You may realize that your life is about half over, and you begin to take stock of who you are and why you're here and where you're going. It's a time when you come face to face with fulfilled and unfulfilled dreams and achievements and goals and relationships. When evaluating your life at this time, there are a few things you need to remember. As you evaluate, first, you need to keep a firm foundation in God. Psalms 31, verses 1 through 3. You, O Lord, I put my trust. Let me never be ashamed. Deliver me in your righteousness. Bow down your ear to me. Deliver me speedily. Be my rock of refuge, a fortress of defense to save me. For you are my rock and my fortress. Therefore, for your name's sake, lead me and guide me. We must beware lest we see God as an enemy at this time of life. Unfortunately, God is often blamed for the situations in which we find ourselves. We hold God responsible for our troubles, our aging bodies, or the obligations we must fulfill, or the feeling of lost youth. Have you ever known a Christian who has always lived according to God's plan, but suddenly, during middle age, just does an abrupt about-face and rejects God and all of His principles? It may be that in her midlife evaluation she found insufficient answers and placed the blame on God. Her belief was shaken, so she rejected the whole basis of her faith. I knew a woman who did this, just walked out of her life, leaving behind her husband and 4 very young children, as well as the church. Dr. James Dobson said this about middle age: both males and females can expect to be jostled and jarred while traveling that unpaved section of the highway. We must be sure that our foundation is on firm ground. Matthew 7, verses 24 through 27. Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rains descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. So we know that the children's song, "The wise man built his house upon a rock," that came straight from that verse. When the rains of midlife come tumbling down, our house can survive only if it's built upon the rock instead of on a foundation of sand. It is imperative that our faith in God stands firm during this time of life. As we're evaluating our life, if you're married, you need to evaluate with your husband. If a husband and wife reach midlife, there is a very real danger if they begin to evaluate their lives separately. A husband may evaluate his life and decide more time should be devoted to his family. At the same time, a wife may evaluate her life and decide the family needs less attention and she wants to devote more time to herself. Do you see the conflict there? Midlife can be a time when marriages flounder. We've seen it over and over. Men and women can change either slightly or massively during this time frame. It's important that married couples go through this stage of life together, being sensitive to the needs of each other. One study said 80% of men between 34 and 42 experience a midlife trauma of some variety. Dr. Jim Conway, in his book, Men in Midlife Crisis, came to the conclusion that David's affair with Bathsheba actually occurred during a severe midlife crisis. He bases his theory on some of the Psalms that David wrote that reveal the classic struggles of a middle-aged man. Look at Psalms 102, verses 3 and 4. For my days are consumed like smoke, and my bones are burned like a hearth. My heart is stricken and withered like grass, so that I forget to eat my bread. Also verse 11 in that same chapter. My days are like a shadow that lengthens, and I wither away like grass. Further down in that chapter, in verses 23 and 24, he weakened my strength in the way. He shortened my days. I said, "Oh my God, do not take me away in the midst of my days. Your years are throughout all generations." One version quotes verse 23 as, "He cut me down in middle life." Maybe the evaluation process in middle age is more difficult for men than women. Whether middle age contributed to David's sin or not, we need to be aware of the feelings of our mates and ourselves so that we can continue to grow closer together during this time and not grow apart. We need to evaluate our strengths and weaknesses honestly. We need to take responsibility for ourselves, for who we are and where we are. Galatians 6, verses 4 and 5 tells us this, "But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone and not in another, for each one shall bear his own load." We should be prepared to set goals and find workable means of achieving them. Mr. Wright suggests in his book asking yourself the following questions. What areas of my life do I find satisfying? What areas of my life do I find meaningless? Am I living in accord with my values? Am I working at something I believe in? Do I have any outside interest? When was the last time I tried something new? Do I exercise my mind and my imagination? By evaluating your strengths and weaknesses, your likes and dislikes, by knowing yourself, you may decide that you are pleased and satisfied with your life as it is, and you want to continue down the same path. You may, on the other hand, decide that some modifications are needed to be made. If you need a change, midlife can be a time for a new beginning. We should be more stable now by the time we reach midlife and more capable of making wise choices. You may choose to go back to school or to renew your relationship with your husband or to spend more time helping others. Just be sure that God is still your number one priority and that any changes you make are in accordance with His will. So you have evaluated your life and made whatever adjustments you need. There are other changes in your life that you need to be aware of. So the second thing we're going to consider is the change. There are two big changes that hit us in middle age. The first is a change in our bodies, big time. Our bodies are important to us, and we are responsible for taking care of them. Look at 1 Corinthians 3, verses 16 and 17. Do you not know that you are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? If anyone defiles the temple of God, God will destroy him. For the temple of God is holy, which temple you are. Our bodies are the temple of God, but at this time in our lives, they may begin to turn against us. The time of midlife can be likened to those turbulent teen years. Both periods are relatively short-term, age-related times of transition, which can produce intense anxiety and self-doubt and introspection and agitation. Both times are marked by significant physical changes. In all that's written about midlife, the emotional changes for men are discussed. But for women, although there may be emotional changes, the physical side usually dominates the discussion of women in midlife. A woman's body goes through many changes in the 4th and 5th decades of life. Our bodies start sending us different messages than they did when we were younger. Now our bodies are saying, slow down a little, watch your weight, and you didn't really like brown hair anyway. Author Irma Bombeck said, I've got everything I had 25 years ago, but now it's all 4 inches lower. We can start to understand that when we hit middle age. Our society places so much emphasis on staying young and looking beautiful, but during this time we may start to turn gray and gain a few extra pounds or a few wrinkles. We notice shifts in our shapes. We may begin to really look the middle age that we are. We can still try to look our best and look our age. It's kind of sad, isn't it, to see a 40-year-old trying to dress like a teenager to hold on to her youth? During this menopausal period of time, which can happen anytime between 35 and 55, women will lose their ability to bear children. In the process, some women, not all by any means, may experience depression, low self-esteem, hot flashes, vertigo, headaches, crying spells, and various other physical and emotional symptoms. In other words, you may feel lousy at times. Someone named the 7 dwarfs of menopause: grumpy, sleepy, itchy, sweaty, bloated, moody, and forgetful. Maybe these hints will be helpful to the woman who's suffering from these changes. Acknowledge what these changes represent and why they are occurring. This may be difficult because it's a step of admission to ourselves that we are growing older. We hate to admit that we are going through the change. We need to realize that most of these physical symptoms are temporary. Women undergo tremendous hormone adjustments in midlife that can account for at least some of these physical symptoms. Usually after a time, the female body settles back down and that period of transition is over. If you need help, don't be ashamed to ask for it. If your physical symptoms or your emotional symptoms are getting to be too much for you, call the doctor. If you need to talk to a counselor, don't be afraid to contact one. Remember, you will not be the first woman to need medications or counseling. I heard one woman say that she thought life wasn't worth living, and then she discovered hormone replacement therapy. It changed her whole outlook. If you need help, talk to a doctor. Talk to friends who have been through it. Find resources to help. You are not crazy, and you will get better. One reason that all of this is important is that when you don't feel well physically or emotionally, it can affect you spiritually. Maybe your physical symptoms are making you tired or irritable or feeling unwell, and you find yourself not feeling up to attending worship services or participating in other activities with fellow Christians. Maybe your emotional symptoms are leaving you feeling out of sync with God. We just need to be careful lest our midlife changes cause us to separate ourselves from our relationship with God. Another major change that often takes place during midlife is the development of the empty nest. It's that time when your children leave home, they go to college, they get a job, they get married, and suddenly the house is empty. Or is it sudden? For isn't this what we've been working toward for 20 plus years or so? To see our children move into the world on their own? Remember, we said in an earlier lesson that our goal as a mother is not to be needed. We want our children to grow, to be strong enough and wise enough and mature enough to follow the natural progression of life, to live their own lives. As parents, we often do not deserve much credit for foresight. Watching our children grow up in a way is an inherent aspect of rearing a family, yet it almost seems to come as a surprise to us when it does happen. The empty nest will naturally produce some feelings of sadness and loss, but these feelings need not be devastating. It can be a time for positive changes in your life. So how can we handle the empty nest? Well, first we can prepare for it. Realize that your children are alone from God. He wants us to love them and to raise and train them and then free them to serve Him. Real love turns loose and gives them freedom to grow. Turning loose is easier to discuss than it is to practice, though, isn't it? We mothers want to hold on as tightly and as long as we can to these children in whom we have invested so much time and effort. But we can turn loose a little easier if we're prepared for it. We need to recognize that our children will leave home one day. Talk about it. Say it out loud. Well, when you go away to college, well, when you are grown and have your own home, be prepared mentally. Lack of forethought about their departure can make it traumatic, but ignoring it will not make it go away. Remember, this is what we want for our children, to be happy, mature, independent adults. It might help some if you engage in child launching. Certain rituals surround sending a child into the world. If a marriage is taking your child, then wedding preparations abound. If college is the destination, there's clothes and towels and sheets and luggage and all that must be prepared. These rituals really have a twofold purpose. It prepares the one who is leaving, but it also helps the one staying home handle that difficult transition. It gives us a sense of purpose. During this time of the empty nest, keep your marriage a high priority. You know it as well as I do. Many of the women who suffer greatly with the empty nest syndrome are those whose whole lives have been devoted to their children. If a parent finds more fulfillment in the children than in the marriage partner, then a vacuum is created when those children leave home. Many studies show that when the last child leaves home, there is an increased likelihood of marital maladjustment. A husband and wife are thrown together with no one else to talk to and no children to talk about. We've noted several times in this study, Titus 2, love your husbands, love your children. Pay attention to your husband, because one day it will just be the two of you again. If you and your husband have had the right kind of relationship throughout your marriage, then the time of life when your nest empties can be a time to renew your togetherness, to do things that were impossible while the children were home. You can sleep late on Saturday. You can go out to dinner. You can take off for the weekend on 5 minutes' notice. In other words, it can be a time of newfound freedom. So instead of thinking of it as an empty nest, you can think of this period as the freedom stage, or maybe the second honeymoon stage. Parents who have planned for their children's departure and who have been devoted to their marriage relationship can enjoy these afternoon years of a marriage. You also need to have satisfying activities apart from your children. Begin very early in your parenting adventure to develop interest of your own. Don't live through your children. I talked to a woman once whom I had just met, and most of her conversations centered around how sad it was without the children at home, how empty the house seemed. She just went on and on and on about how sad it was. And I assumed that her children had recently left and she just hadn't adjusted yet. Then she mentioned that her youngest child had been married several years and had a child, but she was still mourning his leaving. One woman said when her last child left for college, she stood looking out the window every day for weeks, thinking, what is left for me to do? That's not what God wants for us. But to help with that, you need to have your own interests, your own activities to pursue. Maybe you always wanted to check out books from the library but never had the time to read them. Maybe you wanted to take courses at the college. Maybe there are some old friendships you would like to renew. I know one woman who took up oil painting and making historical quilts. Having an interest of your own will make that adjustment to an empty nest much easier. And certainly, you can stay busy working for the Lord. We have been looking at all these different stages in a woman's life from the perspective of a Christian woman. So what can a middle-aged woman whose children have left the nest do for the Lord at this time of her life? This can be the time when you accomplish the most for God and His kingdom. You have more freedom than in recent years. You may be faced with fewer financial pressures now that the children are on their own. You have more time on your hands. You are more mature and confident. All of these benefits can be used in the Lord's service. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 58. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. If someone calls you in the middle of the night about a death or illness, you don't have to tend to the children. You can just go to help. If a younger woman needs advice or a listening ear, you can be available to her. The opportunities for service are unlimited. The lonely, the sick, the bereaved, the lost, the list goes on and on. For myself, I wrote 2 books for ladies' Bible classes after my children left home, something I'd always wanted to do and never had the time. A Christian woman should never have to worry about having enough to do when the children are grown. If you want to devote more time to the Lord's work, but you aren't sure what to do, try this. Write down 5 things you can do well, whether it's cooking, teaching, talking on the phone, driving, whatever. But then examine that list and decide how you can use those talents to serve God. Staying busy working for the Lord will bless your midlife years, and it will scare away that empty nest syndrome. The prospect of evaluation and change in midlife can be frightening. For strength, like David, we always rely on the Lord. Psalms 37:5 says, "Commit your way to the Lord. Trust also in Him, and He shall bring it to pass." I like the way this reads in the New Century Version. It says, "Depend on the Lord. Trust Him, and He will take care of you." If you hit a hard spot in the road of life during middle age, turn to God, and He will take care of you. Middle age can be a glorious time in your life, in your marriage, and in your service for God. I hope it's going to be a time when you soar to new heights in your faith and in your reliance on God. May God bless you during the middle age period of your life.